Good afternoon, everyone here on Domain Station's Facebook page. I am Chrissy Souders, and we are here today to talk about exponential mindset. And we're here with YuhMei Hutt, who is the president of Golden Lighting. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Chrissy. I'm very glad to be here again.
And we're talking about the 7 tenets of exponential mindset. So first of all, just give us a little bit of your background and why you are going to be sharing this information, this wealth of information with us today.
It's something I came across a couple years ago, and I found it very useful in formulating some new strategies for my company, and it's propelled quite a bit of growth for me, even in times like these. And it's
Certainly.
Something that I feel that is useful to any leader, whether it's for a business or a nonprofit, any type of organization can find this type of thinking useful.
And I've had the pleasure to actually sit in on your workshop and certainly learned a lot from that. So very excited that we're having it on a live stream for people who can't meet you in person and right now with the workshops. And I also want to encourage anybody watching right now and tuning in to make sure you share this post and also please engage with us. We'd love to get your comments on here on our show and also get your questions answered by YuhMei today for the exponential mindset. So without further ado, let's get this started.
Thanks, Chrissy. My name is YuhMei Hutt. As Chrissy discussed earlier, I am president of a company called Golden Lighting, and we are a manufacturer of residential light fixtures. We design the pretty lights that go into homes and things like chandeliers, wall sconces, bath lights. Those are the types of products that my company develops. And we sell them to over 1,500 brick and mortar stores all over North America, and also sell to some pretty big online e-tailers. What I'm seeing right now is my industry is being disrupted by large e-commerce companies like Amazon and Wayfair that are redefining the way business is done. And it's not just in lighting, but just retail in general. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty about where the retail industry is going. And I remember how I felt a few years ago. I was kind of in a professional slump and I didn't know what to do. I ended up going to a place called Singularity University, and it just exposed me to a lot of new thinking, exponential technologies. It just opened my eyes about all the opportunities available to all of us. And I came back renewed with many ideas, and we started implementing, and it started the next wave for my company. And we ended up, from when I've started, we've grown the company 10 times, and a lot of that growth has happened in the last 4 years. And even in today's environment, with the pandemic, we still see growth, and there's still lots of headroom for us. So on with this. Okay. My favorite quote from my first Singularity conference: neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. And this was said by the CEO of Blockbuster less than 2 years before they went bankrupt. What's going on here? How quickly can the tables turn for large established businesses? And what we're experiencing is, hold on, is that sound coming from me? Like that background noise? You hear that? Is that an adjustment I need to do, or are you not hearing it?
I'm not hearing it. So
okay, it's just me. Sorry. Well, we're experiencing a new Kodak moment. And if there are some of you maybe too young to remember this, but there's a company called Kodak that used to create photographic equipment and film. And in '96, they were a huge company with a market cap of $28 billion and over 140,000 employees, and all to develop cameras and camera equipment and film and the chemicals to process those pictures. And then, what ended up happening? 2012, they're bankrupt, and they were down to a less than about a tenth of their size. And almost in the same year, Instagram was born, and were able to develop a company at $1 billion, sell their company for $1 billion to Facebook with only 13 employees. What is going on? What is this new Kodak moment? And here's something ironic. Kodak invented the digital camera, and they didn't know the potential of this technology, the digital and exponential nature of this digital technology. And at that time, when they developed the camera, I think it had a resolution of 0.1 megabytes, and it took a huge file, and it was a big, bulky camera. And the people in the company was like, there's no way people would want to use this. It's not usable. It's not as good quality as film. And but they didn't realize that as the technology progresses, it would end up surpassing even what you could do on film, which is Instagram took advantage of the digital imaging technology that came out of Kodak. That's amazing. So that's what we would call a new Kodak moment, where they didn't even know what they had. And this is happening not just in Kodak and film and pictures, but it's happening all over in all industries, where over 10 years ago, you had private companies that had kind of a unicorn status, which is $1 billion valuation. We only had one company, but with time, we started seeing more and more of these unicorns pop up. And as of 2019, there were 447 unicorns. It's like, at this point, it doesn't even fit on the page of how many companies that are coming out of this new age of digital disruption. And something to note is the disruption can happen to anyone, any company, any industry. I mean, who would have predicted that the New York Times would be competing with a company like Facebook? Or did Honeywell expect that they would be competing with Google over thermostats? I mean, just software is eating the world, and disruption can come from anywhere, and you can have competition that you just would never have seen. The other thing that is interesting about this moment is how quickly the change and disruption happens. It almost seems overnight, kind of like with Blockbuster. Within 2 years, they're gone. It took the Catholic Church over a millennia, over 1,000 years, to get 1 billion followers. It took Facebook only 8 years. There's something about the speed at which these technologies and these ideas are spreading is just so fast. And it's changing the logic behind value creation. And these unicorns are going to continue to sprout up everywhere. But before I could talk about exponential mindset and the differences between linear thinking, first I need to explain a little bit of the math concept of the difference between what is linear and what is exponential. So if you're on a linear path, it's very clear that you're going from A to B. If you take 30 steps on a linear path, you go about 30 meters. But if you're on an exponential path and you take 30 steps, you go over 1 billion meters. That's 26 times around the earth. That's just each step change. It shows you the magnitude of how much further you can go, how quickly it can change. Another way to look at it is graphically. You can see the line that's incremental thinking or linear thinking, and exponential thinking is a curve. So incremental is linear, and you go from point A to point B, and there are clear milestones. It's very easy to see the path and where it goes and the destination. And it's all about making something better. But exponential is a path that curves. It's hard to see beyond the curve, and getting to massive results take time, which you can see early on. Many times exponential ideas underperform against linear ideas. And many times that's what they call a deceptive part of the graph. It seems like it's not going to go anywhere. And then suddenly it makes that bend, and then out of nowhere, it seems like, where did this idea come from? It's everywhere, and it's amazing, and it's growing quick, and it's taking over. And the thinking behind exponential is, instead of trying to make something better, you're trying to figure out how to make something different. So exponential has differences in the scale and the speed at which change comes, and it's also deceptive. 1% is only 7 doublings away from 100%. And if someone's doubling at a rate of every year, you can go from 1% underdog, and 7 years later, they winner takes all. That's how quick things can become. So again, to recap, the difference between incremental thinking and exponential thinking, you have the scale. So incremental thinking is trying to make something better, kind of like 10% better. And exponential thinking is making something different on the scale of 10 times better. How can I make something 10 times better? So before I go through the 7 tenets, I want you to constantly ask yourself, when you're evaluating an idea or strategy, what kind of mindset am I using? How am I thinking about this problem? Am I trying to make it better, or am I trying to make it different? And is my scale, how is my scale? Is I'm only just trying to make a little bit step change, or do I just want to completely revolutionize the idea and approach? So the first tenet is you want to set ambitious goals, versus a linear way of thinking is you want to set realistic goals. And the way to think about it is moonshots. So we want to land a man on the moon. That's where it comes from. And the goals need to be huge. What happens if you challenge yourself today, like normally in my company, like, okay, we're already halfway through the year. I can't believe. So at the beginning of the year or end of last year, I have a budgeting process. And it's really easy for me to do budget if I'm thinking incrementally. Okay, I'm going to do 10% better. I can almost programmatically set up my budget. I just add 10% to my revenues, add a little bit of expense. I could probably do it in an hour and be done with it. But if I challenge myself, instead of next year, I'm going to do 10% more, I want to do 10 times more. Everything, all of my plans go out the door. All of my assumptions go out the door. My processes break down. I have to do a complete infrastructure overhaul. I have to think about the different skill sets are needed within my organization. And I have to take another look at who my market is. Does my market even have the capacity to handle going 10 times more? So a lot of this is about scale. When you're starting off with the thinking is 10% versus 10x. And we also did this with Domi too, is like trying to set a big, hairy goal, right? And one idea we've been pushing around at Domi is, how can we have $1 billion of impact in Tallahassee? When you start thinking on that scale, it really changes the way we look at how we engage our clients, and who can be a client, and what partners can we use to be able to successfully implement this impact. It's beyond us. It's beyond just what we can do. The next tenet is following the vision versus following the plan. And this is driven by something called a massively transformative purpose. Massive, and that is audaciously big and aspirational, just like I talked about in the last slide. Huge scale, at least 10 times. It's transformative in that at minimum, you're trying to change an industry. That's like the scale. Maybe it's a community or even the world. It's huge the way you're thinking about this problem. And then there's a purpose to it. The only way you can tackle such a huge goal is if you can get as many stakeholders as possible beyond your organization. It's something that can unite stakeholders, whether it's your customers or your partners or even your competitors, to come in to take on this purpose. Now, one way to think about your purpose is this something that is a purpose to, or is it a purpose with? And one way to attract more people to your purpose is, does it follow the t-shirt test? If you were to put your purpose on a t-shirt, can someone outside of your organization be able to wear that t-shirt? Would they even want to wear that t-shirt? So think about the t-shirt test when you're coming up with your massively transformative purpose. One good example of a great MTP is with Tesla. So Elon Musk, over a decade ago, he wrote this manifesto about how he wanted to change the world. And his purpose was to transition the world to using sustainable energy, because he's very worried about the environment. And he just wanted to make sure that we have a sustainable environment. And so the way he felt that he could do this is he was going to form an electric car company and do it through electric vehicles. And first thing was, he was going to build a sports car, a very expensive sports car, and it was going to be so awesome. And he was going to sell those cars, maybe thousands of them, and then take that money from that fancy sports car and build a more affordable car and start making hundreds of thousands of those cars. And from that project, reinvest that money to even more affordable car that he could sell millions of. And at that scale, he could start making a dent in fulfilling this purpose of transitioning the world to sustainable energy. And the funny thing is about Elon Musk's MTP is, no matter what you think about him or whether or not you think Tesla is going to survive as a company, he's been successful at transforming the auto industry. Because after Tesla's launch of his cars, every single automaker now has an electric vehicle in their product plan. So that's an example of an MTP and how transformative that is. He went out to change an industry and has been successful in doing so. And the crazy thing about him is it doesn't stop with cars. He's going to keep going. The next one in exponential mindset is, we want to maximize learning versus minimizing risk. And the way you do that is you want to pilot new things, and you iterate with the OODA loop. And the OODA loop is a way you kind of do or you observe, you test something out, and you see, did it work, and try it again and start over. And it's a loop, it's a cycle. And it is really, really difficult to reinvent or be innovative in a company. I know this. It's been, I came back from Singularity with a lot of lofty ideas, and then some of my team were like, "You're crazy. This is crazy. Why would we do that? It's not gonna turn out the way you think." And many times with legacy companies, and existing systems is the immune system of the company attacks new ideas. And I find that sometimes to overcome that, it's good to encourage people to think about things with a beginner's eye, like as in, if I were to start over in this, or even bring complete newbies into it and just say, does this make sense in today's society? Like, are our assumptions still relevant? Is our knowledge outdated? Sometimes when in existing companies, you don't realize that some of our practices become outdated, and you worry about trying new things. But in my company, we try to pilot things. It's as opposed to launching things at a massive scale. We start things kind of small and just say, hey, try it out. Doing things on a small scale, it doesn't hurt you, but the thing is you try to do it often and as many times as possible, and that you continually iterate. The other part about maximizing learning is the mental models. So a lot of focus in today's business is on business models. But what is more important is how we think, how we make sense of the world. And how mental models are how we see cause and effect and how we get where we are going. And the way we stay relevant is to keep our models up to date. And that we also have to realize that there's some things that we need to unlearn. Like I said before, sometimes our knowledge can become outdated. So how can you unlearn things? Where do you find your ideas? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you replenish and broaden your perspective? For me, I constantly go out and go to different conferences that aren't even related to my industry. I like to talk to people who aren't in my business and talk to them about business and how they do things and try to make analogies. And the reason why I do that is because innovation in my industry isn't going to come from within my industry. It's going to come, these ideas are going to come from outside of my industry. So I replenish myself constantly by going outside and meeting new people. I'm with Domi. I get lots of exposure that way, or going to conferences and learning new things. And to steps to unlearning is really difficult. There's this really great video I don't have a link to, but it shows this guy trying to unlearn how to ride a bike, and it's almost impossible. It took him 9 months to figure out how to unlearn how to ride a bicycle. It doesn't make sense, I'm telling you right now, but you should look it up. I forget the name. I'll try to come up with a link later, but how to unlearn riding a bike is very entertaining. But the first step to unlearning is recognizing that your old mental model is no longer relevant or effective. The first is just acceptance. And the second is you need to find a new mental model that better achieves your goal. And a question I like to ask my team quite often is not when we're in meetings discussing problems and issues, it's not what are we going to do about it? The question should be, how should we be thinking about this? That's a deeper question. There are 4 new mental models out now, and I could go probably another hour on all of these mental models. It'll be really quick. But it's how we can change how we think of ourselves as individuals, as leaders. And we can also shift from a product and service to a platform. I'll talk a little bit more about platforms later. And a network that enables others, building a network that enables others to create value. and shifting from an audience to a community, and how we engage with our customers. And instead of just serving our customers may be serving themselves and creating their own products and services. And then changing from a hierarchical to a collaborative, agile network. These are the four main shifts in thinking and how we see ourselves and engage in our business to have these new breakthroughs in thinking. And what's interesting about these four new mental models is that it changes our relation. It's the change in our relationship to different people, and it's the change in relationship to how we do work. One example of a mental model versus a business model I like to use is with Southwest Airlines. So several decades ago, Southwest Airlines came onto the scene, and they came out with a new business model, the discount airline model, where they really undercut the pricing for flights. And many companies tried to copy what Southwest did, like companies like Continental, but failed because they copied the business model, but they didn't copy the mental model. All they did was they tried to cut costs. But they didn't try to copy the way Southwest thinks. And how Southwest thought of themselves as a company is that they were a company that serves people using their airplanes. And so it's people focused. Whereas other carriers use airplanes to carry people. It's a completely different focus, and the words matter. And Southwest's focus on the people and service, that was felt. And this is what was resonating with their customer base. And they were able to do it in a way to cut that also cut costs. So, and the airline company that best adapted to this new business model was JetBlue, which they emulated the mental model. This next one is one of my favorite tenets of exponential mindset. You want to personalize versus standardize. And one way I like to think about it is standardization achieves something called scalable efficiency. This is like dominates traditional business models today. And in retail, like for me, what we've been doing for the longest time is how can we drive down the costs? Well, you try to create some standardization, and maybe, like, for instance, instead of trying to sell one, I can maybe reduce the cost if I create volume and I made 500 products at the same time. I can probably lower my cost, and that creates some scalable efficiency. You want to standardize things to create something that's more generic and low price, but it requires limited selection to create that efficiency. And now this new way of thinking is, how can I create personalization for my customers? And it's not just personalization where you do a one-to-one. It's like making something bespoke, right? But how can I create scalable personalization, scalable customization, where we can have unlimited selection for our customers? And it's not just scalable in a way that you could deliver these goods or services at the same cost or speed as standardization. That's the trick. That's actually very difficult. And some examples I've seen a lot of in the food industry, like for instance, like with Chipotle, the burrito bar, right? You go in and, traditionally in a restaurant, like in the past, you go sit down and get a menu and you order your burrito, and then you just pretty much the way it comes. Maybe you can customize it a little bit, and then 25 minutes later you get served, right? You go to Chipotle, you go up to the bar, and then it's like unlimited selection. You can make your burrito right on the spot with all the ingredients, and it's fast and it's fresh and it's fairly inexpensive. And you're seeing this type of personalization in food all over, and ice cream and pizzas and 3 minutes and just sandwiches, probably the original one, right, that a lot of people can identify with. But it's not just with food. You can do this in just about any industry. And in my company, we spent a lot of time figuring out how to create personalization, and we were able to come out with a line of products that allow our customers a lot more selection than previously offered by my competitors, and with a mix and match finishes and sizes and color shades. And we have an incredible amount of selection. Like typically when we would launch a line of products, you might have 10 or 20 different items in a collection. And with our new approach to creating the scalable personalization, we're able to launch collections, maybe 300, 400 options. It's just unprecedented in my industry. And it started as an idea a few years ago, and it's really taken off. And now it takes up over half of my business. So I can attest to you that this concept really works. And I can see different companies do scalable personalization in medicine, in beauty products. Imagine creating your own custom color just to your face, or the exact color shade of lipstick like you want, not just what is offered. Or personalized underwear, that would be great, right? Personalized nutrition. The opportunities are endless here, and people want it, and people will pay for it. But if you can figure out how to make it scalable, then that's what will make it exponential for you. Another one that I really have been working on in my company is empowering decision making versus centralizing decision making. And what it is creating something called Doctrine. A little bit more about that, but Doctrine is something that best example is with the military and in the fog of war. So in the military, how do you train soldiers? You train them to fight and give them the skills to fight. And then you spend months, years learning how to formulate strategies on how to engage the enemy. And maybe you decide that, okay, we're going to go to war, and these are the battle plans. You spend months doing that. But you know what? The moment you engage the enemy out in the battlefield, those plans go out the door. They immediately become irrelevant because your enemies are agile and the environment changes. They're things that they're unpredictable. So how do soldiers get trained to make decisions in an unpredictable environment? There's not going to be an SOP for every single situation that you encounter. So the military has something called Doctrine, which is kind of like a set of logic, a way of thinking of how to fight out in the field. And it's a set of decision principles which creates autonomy for the soldiers, to make the best decision with the latest information they have on hand. And one example of this is like in the incremental linear mindset. The way you would try to organize your people and manage your people is you focus a lot on alignment and getting everybody on, it's very important to get on the same sheet of paper, but doing the same thing in a certain way, versus empowering autonomy. And like with how quickly things are changing nowadays, especially if you're a large company with many different business strategies out, how can you be agile in that type of environment? So I want to show you an example of birds, flight of starling. I'm going to turn this over to Chrissy to help me show that video.
All right, here we go.
This is a flock of starlings, and these flocks can get hundreds of thousands of birds, maybe in some cases like 1 million birds in one flock. And look at them swarm, and they fly in groups like this. You can pause it now. So this is like a new way of organizing, a new way of thinking about how to organize people. So instead of flocks of geese, which fly in a V formation, there's another way to organize. You can fly in a swarm, just like in a swarm of a flock of starlings. And there are only 3 rules that the starlings follow to be able to fly like this, is that they have to stick together as a group. You follow your neighbors and you don't collide. And they follow those 3 rules, and you can see masses of birds move together. It's just a new way to organize a group. Doctrines are useful because it's a new business tool. It's not something that is taught commonly now in business. But many times in business, the tools are, you have the vision, a mission, purpose, goals, values, strategies, all those things. But now I think you need to add a new tool in the toolbox of doctrine. We need to teach our people how to think critically on behalf of our company, because I, as a manager, as a leader, can't come up with all the ideas, can't see all the problems out there. So I need all my people to be able to think critically out in the front lines and be able to gather that information and make the best decisions possible. And it's not a process manual. It's not an SOP. It's how to help people make decisions. And one example of doctrine in the business world is with Disney. They have very well-established doctrine for their service. Their service is world-class, and they have something. This is their doctrine. They value safety, courtesy, show, and the efficiency, and in this order, where safety is on top and number 1. And this is helpful, because if they're trying to make a decision between whether I need to be courteous to my guests or ensure their safety, they're going to pick safety always, because that's established. That is part of their doctrine. And so example is like if they see, a kid crossing a train track, on their little railroad, they can shout at the kid to get off the track and bypass courtesy because they're trying to ensure their safety. Or in some cases, like Disney has that massive underground network of pathways and walkways underneath their grounds at the parks. And it's not efficient. If you want to, if you're part of the Star Wars world, you can't have a Star Wars dressed person in Frontierland. It just doesn't make sense. So they make them go underneath. It might not be the fastest way, but what they're trying to do is preserve the show, preserve the way, the magic of the place. So here you can see that show is more important than efficiency. So this is very useful for people to make decisions in a company. And I also have established some ways to show empowerment within my organization. A couple of years ago, I was forced into this situation where I got a major health scare, and it made me realize that I need to be replaceable as a leader. Like everyone's replaceable, even myself. And I imagined a world where I wasn't CEO of Golden Lighting. And what was left for my team? Did they know how to make decisions on my behalf? Did they know what keys do I hold that no one else knows how to handle? And it quickly identified to me things I needed to train others and start teaching the the thinking behind some of the decisions I make. And first off, I created company-wide dashboards where I wanted to make sure there's transparency in the organization, where any information that's relevant for running the company is available to all my staff. And how can I expect anybody to make the best possible decisions unless they have the best possible information? And I need to make sure that's available to them. So we created company-wide dashboards where we started measuring everything, efficiency, productivity, errors, profitability, and then people can see these things. And what we had found within very short period of time, within 6 months, we were seeing huge gains and improvement in cutting down our lead times from 5 days down to same day, increasing the number of orders we're getting out. It was incredibly beneficial to the company to have this transparency. And the other thing was how I viewed and organized the people within the company. And what I wanted to do was have my frontline people manage the current state, and my management team brings the department or the company to a future state. And my role as a CEO was to consider the multiple futures for the company. And what ended up happening was we had those dashboards, right? And all the managers were sitting around the table discussing, the implications of them and calling the shots. And I said, after 2 months of this, it's kind of become run of the mill. We need to be able to empower our people to be able to read these numbers and to act on them. So I would like our frontline people to learn how to read them and start running these meetings so they can manage themselves. The manager shouldn't need to manage the employees. If the employees know what they need to do and how to measure their performance, they should be able to manage themselves. So that can free up the bandwidth of the managers to focus on how can I bring about change within the organization and make the team better or make the company better. And that's created a lot of opportunities for my management team. They can spend less time worrying about the day-to-day because the staff are handling it. Okay. The next tenet is you want to expand influence versus expanding authority. And the way this one was kind of difficult for me to grasp. And the way I think about it is authority is very transactional in nature. It's like, I will do this if you give me that, and sometimes it's money. Like, I will pay you $10 if you sell me that product. It's that transactional, and that's authoritative. And the trick is, how can we influence people to do things even without a transaction? How can we compel someone to even want to do it, want to make that transaction with me? And the way you transform authority to influence is by creating gravity. And gravity is generated by trust, gratitude, and reciprocity. And what do I mean by that? So there's something called, within gravity, an orbit. Ongoing relationships beyond individual transactions. So how can you build a relationship with people to drive these transactions? And the trick is you try to embed the transaction in a relationship. One great example is with Starbucks. So back in the day when we could travel and I could go out of town, I don't necessarily go to Starbucks for their coffee. Starbucks had made their name for themselves because they were a third place, another place that people could meet that wasn't their home or their work. It's kind of like middle ground. And I can meet with people at the coffee house, right? At Starbucks in this case. And they emphasize creating the right ambiance and making that place very inviting for people. And like the thing is if I'm going to meet somebody at Starbucks, I'm going to buy a cup of coffee. It's just a given. They don't have to tell me to. It's super convenient, right? So that's an example of where they embed the transaction into the relationship. Another way to think about it is like employee-employer relationships. So my company works for a fantastic company called, my husband works for a fantastic company called Diverse Computing. And many times the authoritative relationship is, I'm going to pay you money and you're going to work for me, right? That's the relationship with the employee and employer. But employers can do other things to compel people to work for them and do great work. And Diverse Computing does amazing things. They have a fantastic work environment. They provide lunches for their team. When I was ill a couple years ago, they let my husband take time off to take care of me, like no questions asked. And they created a lot of gravity with me. And I don't even work with them. I told Lester, you need to do a good job for this company because they care about you. So there are many different things you can set up with your relationships with people, partners, suppliers, customers that can compel them to do business with you that has nothing to do with the transaction. So that is, those are examples of creating influence, which is creating the gravity to compel them to do things with you. Okay, the next tenet is growing your network versus making your numbers. So, So network effects are very, very important for two reasons. One is this is the very nature of exponential and the very nature of speed of exponential ideas. So this is where you can get scale, and this is how you can build scale quickly, is growing your network. And one example is dominoes versus ping pong balls. So with dominoes, it's linear, right? You set the dominoes in a line, and when you knock one over, it like put knocks each domino down at a very, very established rate, right? And it takes a certain amount of time to knock over a line of dominoes. And you can create forks and knock over multiple lines of dominoes, but it's like kind of slow, like when they get knocked over. But I want to show you an example of a network effect with ping pong balls. I'm going to turn this over to Chrissy to set up my next video. You'll need to fast forward I think to, let's see, 89 seconds.
What exponential growth looks like by doing a little experiment. If you'd like to come and stand just there, just turn that way. Okay, that's good. And what's your name?
Matthew.
Matthew, you'd like to hold that. Now, in a moment, we're going to give you a 3, 2, 1 countdown. Okay, when we get to go, all I want you to do is to place the ball in through that little hole at the top. You manage that? Yeah. Okay. Are we ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Amazing. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a high-speed camera that was looking at that, and perhaps we can just do a little action replay and see that in slow motion. So there's the first ball, setting off a couple more. Each of those is setting off several more. And on that curve, we can see the number of balls growing in this very dramatic way. But what's really impressive about exponential growth is that the rate of growth is itself growing exponentially.
And that's good. Thank you, Chrissy. Okay. So in that example, we saw the ping pong balls, and that had network effects where they dropped the ball in and then it knocked the mouse traps, like um, four mouse traps popped the balls, which then affected another 16, which then went up exponentially, 16, 64, and then 256 after that. And it happened almost instantaneously. They had to put that down in slow-mo to show you like what exactly happened. And that's an example of a network effect. But the thing is you can't get network effects unless you fulfill some certain conditions. So here, what they did was they had to create an environment for that. It was in a box that had mouse traps that were armed. Okay, they're ready to go. And then the mouse traps were close to each other so that they could affect each other. And so how does that relate to sales and seeing exponential growth in the company is how can you create network effects within your own organization where other things can influence each other you could do several things to create the environment to create the network effect. So, and because of the network effect, it happens at a great speed. And this is why these companies, these unicorns come out of nowhere. It creates that speed. The other aspect of this is the network itself. Exponential companies use something called a business platform model. So in traditional businesses, the way you would sell is maybe one-to-one, where I'm a supplier of goods or services and I sell to a customer who buys my thing. Or I could sell to multiple people, but it's one-to-one or one-to-many. But in a exponential company, they look at how can I create many-to-many interactions. An example would be like eBay. So eBay, what they do is they're a platform that connects sellers with buyers. They can have an unlimited number of sellers with an unlimited number of buyers. And people could be sellers and they could be buyers or they could be both. And you could be a company on there. You can be an individual. You can be a nonprofit on there. There's like almost no end to the types of people that could transact on that platform. So they're a very great example of a many-to-many business model. And another example is a very stark example of a platform business model that's disrupting an industry. So Uber. So if I were a taxi cab company in New York and I just said, I want to build a taxi cab company. I'm going to have $10 million and I'm going to build this company. So what would I do? I would buy a fleet of cars and I would hire drivers maybe, right, to drive those cars. And very quickly, my money would run out. Maybe I could get like 100, cars or whatnot. Well, the thing with Uber is they're like, how can we get a platform for ride sharing? And so what they did was we're going to create a platform to connect people with cars to people who want rides. So it's a many-to-many. So instead of spending their money on physical things like cars and people, they spent it on the software. And it cost them almost nothing to add a new driver or add a new customer. And that is the power of creating a platform versus working in a traditional business model. As for me, very quickly, I am physically limited by the number of cars I can buy with the money I have, right? It's very slow going. It's very incremental. And Uber, very quickly, they're another unicorn. They were worth $49 billion earlier this year. I don't know what they're worth now, but they've been very successful. And they're even considering moving to other sectors and trying to offer their platform in other ways, including postal delivery, limo service, groceries, and trucking. Imagine what would happen if they created platforms in those other industries. It'd be incredibly disruptive. And those were all 7 tenets of the exponential mindset. And recap here, the difference, I like to do this little overview, the difference between exponential mindset and incremental mindset. Remember, incremental is a 10% thinking versus exponential 10x. And a lot of times, I like to ask myself, which mindset am I in? Am I thinking exponentially or am I thinking incrementally? And I don't want to say that incremental thinking isn't useful. It is. And many times, even still in my business, I migrate between the two. And it's just sometimes when I'm trying to think big or think differently, I have to remind myself, which type of thinking am I using? And I forgot to add that all of this credit for exponential thinking, the resources I got for this, was inspired by a talk by Mark Bonchek that I heard at Singularity University. And this is a chart I got from his website at Shift Thinking, if you want to go check it out. He's an amazing, amazing thinker. And some of the effects of the exponential tenets or the exponential values, if you create a platform, that is what's going to give you the 10x growth. If you have a network, that's what's going to give you the speed. If you have a community, that's how you get your engagement, orbit and loyalty, narrative, commitment. I didn't talk about that. And then doctrine is the agility, the ability to change if your environment or conditions in the economy changes. What I've also found when I'm using exponential tenets is that anyone can use them. Anyone, this is a doctrine of thinking. So you can use this for just regular problem solving. It's not just for business strategy. And you can use them for small or large problems. And it's something that I have taught my team, and I've taught multiple teams these tenets. But I also found that if you use one tenet in an idea, that's a pretty good idea. If you use 2 tenets, it's excellent idea. If you use 3 or more tenets in the same idea, you probably have a winner. Just go for it. And like I said earlier, there's many additional resources out there for you. These books and resources have been incredibly helpful for me. Peter Diamandis' first book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, is amazing. That has helped me think more positively and openly about the future. And Exponential Organizations, an incredible book. I almost feel like if there's a prioritization of the books that you read, I would read Exponential Organizations first by Salim Ismail. And what that does is helps you rethink how your organization should be structured to take advantage of exponential thinking and technologies. And then Mark Bonchek, who's introduced me to the mindset. And then he has, I think, at least 40 or 50 different articles in a Harvard Business Review, fantastic resources. And then, of course, Singularity University publishes a lot of free, great content on their site. You should definitely check that out. And I'm doing this talk on behalf of YuhMei Station. I am a chairwoman of YuhMei Station, and we are a local incubator here in the Tallahassee area. And we help people take their concept, their business ideas, and help them go through the process of making it a reality. And the best way to predict the future is to create it. And we give the future a home. And we have resources available to help incubate your ideas, get access to the business community, and also offer a place for you to work as well. And I will now open it up to questions. If you'd like a copy of these slides, I think we're going to be publishing a link very soon to these slides, or you can also email me your questions at yuhmeistation.org.
Fantastic. Now, I just want to make sure everyone who's watching right now, please share your comments or questions, because this is the time to get your questions answered by Yuh-Mei. I have a question. So let's say I'm in the incremental mindset right now, and you had said, hey, if you're hitting like 2 tenants out of the 7 or something like that, where should I start? What are some good tenants to start with?
I think the 2 places I would start, if it's an existing business, I would look at empowering the team and not trying to monopolize all the ideas, because if you're really stuck with trying to find ideas, the best thing is to get more minds on it and trying to get more people to collaborate with you on the ideas. And then the second place I would be looking to really deeply is personalization. I think that's a wave going through all industries.
And for personalization, some people may have like the retail, or they may be doing something more technology. And so I know you took golden lighting and personalized it. So how difficult is it to start the personalization process?
Very painful. I think what creating the scalable personalization, the scalable part is more difficult, which is why I would pilot it, maybe not in an efficient way, but just seeing if people want personalization for your different products or services. And you may find that that personalization lends itself better for certain types of things that you offer. It might not be something you want to offer on everything, but you start with one area.
I guess that would also help with the financial aspect of it, because some may be thinking, okay, well, I need to change my mindset to exponential, but is it going to take me a lot of money to do that? And so are these things that you can implement on a budget?
Well, it's just thinking. It's not a software. It's not, I think that there's nothing more powerful than your mind. And that's why I love exponential mindset, because it's free. Like you just come up with these ideas, and maybe some of your ideas are expensive, but you just continue to brainstorm until you find one that is more attainable to start.
And for someone who may have that fear, what would you say to them?
Fear? I guess the question is, what would happen? Like if you're thinking about your future 5 years down from now, 10 years from now, would what you're doing still be relevant? And what is the cost of not doing something? And I had a watershed moment just like that. A few years ago, I had a customer that was making some really incredible demands on me. And I was like, there's no way I can do that. I can't afford to do that. I don't want to do that. And then they basically gave me an ultimatum. And then they asked me this question, which I ask all the time now, is if I were to start over my business today, would I do it the same way? And my answer to that question was, hell no, I wouldn't do anything the same way now. Like now that I have all this information, I was completely redesign my company. But then they followed up and asked me, well, why aren't I doing it right now? If I already know that what needs to change, why am I not doing it? And I had no good answer. And so I just, you know what, if I'm going to be disrupted, I might as well disrupt myself instead of having someone else disrupt me. Just do it. I have no choice.
And some companies, there's more than one owner or one leader. What if one of the leaders or one of the owners aren't necessarily compliant or in agreement with restructuring to make it so that you are following these tenants? Does that hurt you in a way?
I think that's guaranteed to happen. I think the bigger your team, the more difficult it is to create that buy-in. And even on small teams that I manage right now, like we see that there's disagreement about what the future is and what we should or shouldn't do. And with legacy business models and legacy businesses, it's really difficult to institute change and new thinking, because what they say is, hey, it's working now. Why do we need to change? Like, there's no need to change. But then you come into environments like today with the pandemic, where everyone's forced to change right this moment. And that, I think, it's a shame that it takes a crisis for people to realize like what's critical, and like when they will admit something is broken or not working. But I guess I don't really have a good answer. It just takes time and patience and talking to these people.
But at the same token, it's kind of good to have that disagreement, because some people might be really laser focused on obtaining a certain goal, but maybe if they just listen more, they would be able to see, oh, well, maybe what I want to obtain isn't always the best thing to do, right? So it's good to have that disagreement. Or would you say make sure you are in business with someone who falls in line with your vision?
Sometimes they can't visualize that future, and you have to do a pilot with someone else. Like many times I find it's a bandwidth issue. They're just so busy. They don't have the capacity to try new things. Like, they don't have the luxury of time. And so I've had instances where I've hired new people, like people with zero experience on my company, to spearhead these new projects, because they don't have any preconceived notions about how things need to be. And we pilot it, and some of them are failures and some of them are successful. And the ones that are successful, like, hey, yeah, actually this could work. Let's try it. Let's go for it.
Yeah, I will say, having the exponential mindset and meeting you months ago and having this conversation with you months ago, has really helped me envision the future for my own business. And I think particularly in this moment for business owners who, we all got hit with the pandemic, we do have the time now to see, if what we're doing is sustainable and is something that will be able to continue to be sustainable in the future. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think I don't think that some of this stuff is temporary. I think that this is a fantastic excuse to try something different. And in fact, I feel that people should try more than one thing, because you just don't know which one's going to work. And it's not about things being digital. Let me make that very clear. Netflix, they started their company, like they moved to like the DVDs, right? And they weren't disruptive until it went to streaming. But the DVD is digital, like that can be manufactured in like a very scalable way. But it's just the relationship that's changed. So you just need to go back to those 4 mental models, and just how are you thinking about your role? Like how can I change my relationship with my customer or with my employees? I think that's really where you're going to find the transformation.
Yeah, certainly. And it might be tough to have that introspective view of yourself and to take that time to do that. But I think with these tenants, it can make it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm open. I've posted my email up there. If you guys, any of you want to bounce ideas off of me, I'm more than happy to do a little brainstorming session with you.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Well, this was excellent. And we certainly appreciate everyone who joined us today, and Yuh-Mei for sharing your knowledge with us for these 7 tenants and helping local businesses and businesses, maybe not within this community right now. So certainly thank you so much. And we we appreciate Domestation and putting this on, and for you guys following us, and also make sure you check out the website as well too, because this will be posted on the website as well too. Anything else, Yuh-Mei?
No, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to work with you. I'm so glad that you're hosting me today.
Yes, and you know, virtual hug, or you know. Anyway, so hopefully we'll be able to learn more and hear more from you in the near future. And without further ado, that is the end of this broadcast. Everyone, have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching. Bye.
Bye.